Well, thanks for coming. Definitely a intimate crowd. Our work is maybe going to be a little different than some of the other stuff that you'll see here, but we're really happy to be here and to share the stuff that we're doing at Hack Club. Um, so, a little bit of structure for the talk. Lexi and I are both presenting. So one quarter of the audience is actually, or actually a little bit more, is actually presenting. And we are going to tell you a little bit about who we are and about the organization that we work for, which is a nonprofit based in the US that helps young people get into open source, and is trying to develop kind of like the next generation of open source people in the world. We're going to talk a little bit about the educational philosophy that underpins the work of our organization. And you're probably going to hear more epistemological philosophy than you thought you would. But hopefully in an entertaining way that makes sense. And then we're going to tell you about the way that we implement this work in the tools that we build, the open source tools that we build, that we call the you ship, we ship model currently. And you can see there's two pieces of hardware up front here, which in the latter half of the actual workshop you can play around with, and then also use the associated online tools that accompany this hardware. So a little bit about who I am. My name is McElroy. I originally got into open source through the maker world, actually. I discovered makerspaces in college, and I was really inspired by them because they basically felt like the learning environment I always wished schools had been. And after school, I decided to travel around the world visiting makerspaces. So this is a picture of me in India building a solar tracking frame. And over the course of visiting all these inventors and makers around the world, I started to look at the tools they were using and decided that a lot of them could be better, and a lot of them were also proprietary. So the sorts of things that people were making couldn't be done by other people. So when I came back to America, I started building open source digital fabrication tools. And those were really the main open source projects that I initially started creating. Here's just a sample of some of my tools. I've built tools for doing circuit design. Most of them are like programmatic code forward ways of making physical things. So on your left, you'll see a tool for doing circuit design in a hardware description language. In the center, there's a system for doing modular robotics building. On the far side, you'll see a graphical programming language for doing 3D modeling, specifically for making clay pots or any other sort of 3D printing. And as a bit of an aside, it's also been interesting to find that you can actually participate in academia if you so want to. I only have my bachelor's degree, but I do frequently publish this work as well, which can open up another community. So it is possible to get into that as an open source developer. But so the real focus of our work today is the work that we do at Hack Club. And Hack Club was an organization founded almost 10 years ago now, actually by a teenager themselves who had a very interesting path. They were really interested in technology and programming, and ended up dropping out of, or testing out of high school when they were 15 and moving to San Francisco on their own to become a professional programmer. And they really felt so lonely with their interests growing up that they decided to start this organization so that young people in the future would have the community they always wished they would have themselves. That person's name is Zach Latta. And so he's still quite young, in his mid-20s now. And I joined Hack Club 2 years ago. And we do a lot of different things. Originally, it was a network of after-school coding clubs all around the world. You can see some of the locations of the clubs here. But the general idea of the work is to build community and to also help role model for young people what it means to be a great technologist, and to elevate teens who are already doing that work themselves. So we're a global network. We have all these physical clubs in almost 40 countries, I think actually more. And then we also have a very active online community of more than, I think it's actually closer to 20K, but I was conservative here with saying 10. And we also do a lot of events, which are always free for the young people participating. We've done some crazy events, like a cross-country hackathon in the US, where we got some antique train cars and hooked them on to a train and then built an industrial server and brought 42 hack clubbers from around the world onto this 10-day train trip across the country where they built their own internet. We do hackathons every year where we bring hundreds of kids from all around the world together to build projects. And those are typically organized by teens themselves, actually. And then the work that I tend to focus on, well, the general ethos for our work is that building and sharing is the best way to learn. So the work that I do is I focus on building accessible tools to help people make things with technology and build community while building those tools together. Now a bit about to the philosophy section. This philosophy that the best way to learn is by building things and sharing them with others comes from a child psychologist, actually, Jean Piaget, who is one of the most prominent psychologists of the 20th century. And he created this idea. He was really interested in studying like the formation of knowledge, and he is best known for his work categorizing like the stages of development in young people. And created this idea of constructivism that I'll talk about in a moment. But interestingly, he brought a lot of people to his lab over the years, and he brought in a number of mathematicians to help him study the formation of formal reasoning in young folks. And one of those people, who was a mathematician, and came to study with this child psychologist or to work with him, actually ended up becoming one of the people that Piaget thought was one of his like great proteges. So curiously, one of the great child psychologists of the 20th century, one of his best students was actually a mathematician. And that mathematician went on to become a computer scientist. His name was Seymour Papert, and he went on to be one of the founding faculty members at the MIT AI lab, and then later the Media Lab, which is a very well-known lab at MIT. And he did some excellent work around, he's kind of the father of like educational technology, I would say. He created one of the first programming languages for kids with Wally Fertzig and Cynthia Solomon in '68, I believe. It's called Logo. Maybe some of you have used it. And he also developed this idea of constructionism that I'll talk about in a moment, that he articulated in this book called Mindstorms, which is one of my favorite books. I think it's one of the best books ever written on learning and technology separately, and I'm sure it's the best book that's ever written on both at the same time. It's what Lego Mindstorms, the kind of Lego robotics, is named for, in honor of. And the idea that he lays out, he talks about developing Logo and the kind of foundational principles of constructionism, which is kind of crudely understood to be that people learn best by making things. And it's often considered to be like the kind of underpinning philosophy of the maker learning movement, maker education movement. I say this as crudely because probably the way that it is described in Mindstorms is something closer to people learn best by reconstruction rather than transmission of knowledge, which is this idea of constructivism that he took from Piaget. And he turned it into a learning theory by also asserting that this is most effective when people construct meaningful products or things that are personally significant to them, which is a bit of a mouthful. But basically what Papert was articulating was that this attitude that young people or people in general are just empty vessels that need to have knowledge poured into them, depicted here with the Nuremberg funnel, is inaccurate. And unfortunately, that's kind of the model that school is like built on, at least in my experience, that you go and you have information just poured into you. And instead, a better way to think about it is that people have these like scaffoldings of what they know, and they learn by adding things onto those scaffoldings and having experiences and expressing themselves in ways that connect to the things that they already know. So the way I like to say it, as I actually already said, was that people learn best by making things and that they care about and sharing them with others. And so if this is our guiding principle, how are we actually trying to realize this in the work that we do? So basically, one way I like to think about the project that we're undertaking, like the meta project that these tools are a part of, is that we're trying to build a new type of public education that is built with open source projects, that with open source ideals and with an open source culture. And the way that we're really instantiating this is with these tools that are part of our You Ship, We Ship initiative. So basically, we build a creative technology that pairs software with hardware. And then when young people around the world build something in that software and they submit it to the community project, then we send them the hardware for free to continue exploring that topic. And these are two of the projects that I have here in front of us as well that we'll talk about in more detail, mostly about the game console Sprig. And this is kind of the grand vision here is that we build a whole collection of these projects so that there's going to be a library of things to do for people interested in learning about technology and engineering, and then also the topics related to the tools that we build can just jump in and participate because everything is available online. And each tool also has a community around it that will support them as they investigate the topic. And so one of the key points here too is that anyone with an internet connection can get started with these things because you can start building just at home with the web-based tools that we make. And then we design the projects in such a way that each project that you build is actually like a contribution to the greater project overall. And the pull request becomes your kind of entryway to this community. So the first one that we did in this vein is a project called Sprig. It's a handheld game console. And Lexi is going to talk about it in much greater detail, so I won't dwell on it too much now. But the general overview of how this works is that we built this web-based multimodal editor, which is JavaScript-based. And when people build games in the editor, they can submit them to the gallery. And then after that gets approved, then we send them the parts to build their own device that can play the games that everyone else made. So Sprig is our first project in this category. And with Sprig, we were also introducing people to games and electronics because the kit that we send them that you see there can also serve as just a general hardware development kit. Obviously, it all comes apart and can be assembled by hand, but it's just a device that has a generic microcontroller, an RP2040, and then various inputs and outputs. And the next project that we're looking at releasing very soon is a small drawing robot that you see here that will introduce people to also art and fabrication, which I referenced previously as a great interest of mine. And that's called Blot. So that's also publicly available. It's a CNC drawing machine or a pen plotter. And the engagement flow is very similar, where we built a web-based editor with a custom library specifically for making vector graphics programmatic art. And then people can submit art to the gallery, and then we'll send them the parts to build a device. This is some of the art that's been made so far. This is just mine because we haven't released the project yet publicly, but just an idea of the sorts of things you can make with programmatic art. And here's a quick demo of the machine running, which we'll do in the later part of the workshop. So with that introduction, I'm going to pass it over to, well, another quality actually I would like to emphasize of these projects is that often I'm the only adult engineer working on developing them, and the rest of the development is done through the community. And for teams that are really engaged, we end up often hiring them to come work with us full time. So I want to pass it off to one of those people who's been like a superstar in our community and came to work full time at Hack Club about 1.5 years ago, and then was a key contributor to Sprig. So Lexi's going to tell you more about more details about Sprig, and then after that, we'll let you play with the editors, play with the tools, and we can just be more informing in our discussion. Thank you.
Hello. Apologize, my voice is a little scratchy, but it'll be fine. Yeah, so before I kind of talk about what Sprig is and sort of how we came to make it, I'm going to give a brief overview of myself. Right now I'm 17. I've been using Linux since I was about 10 years old and contributing to open source since I was 12 when I got a couple thousand stars on GitHub through some like in retrospect mediocre but apparently very useful to many people CSS project that I worked on and I'm still pretty proud of. Most recently, I published a mini book about how computers execute code, and that was, of course, all open source too, and has been read by many thousands of people, I think hundreds of thousands. About a year and a half ago, as Leo mentioned, I joined Hack Club. I got a call from them, from Zach, the founder. He was like, "Hi, you want to come work for us full time?" And I pitched it to my parents, and I got them on board, and I ended up moving out to Vermont and living on my own. And that's where I've been for the past year and a half, working in various projects. And right when I started, Leo over there and another person, Cedric, who isn't here, had built a prototype of a game engine that was designed entirely for making puzzle games. And I really love this project because all of the assets, like music and sprite art, were first of all included as editable ASCII inside the game code. And I thought that was really cool because it was something I hadn't seen before, and it meant you could share games as like a whole unit. And that kind of feeds into the model at the end, where if this is about kind of getting students into open source, that is really an enabler of being able to have this one self-contained file and being able to have that whole thing as your like atomic contribution. I also thought it was really cute. There are a lot of constraints. Each game's a file. There's a limited color palette. You can make music, but only with sine waves and square waves and sawtooth waves. So I joined the project and I built out this initial user interface, which was pretty good, worked for a while. A little bit later, I ended up leading a full redesign and rewrite of the editor from the ground up, which brings it to the version that you see today, and we'll do a little bit of a workshop on. So Sprig is a really cool game engine. It's designed for making puzzle games. It can do a lot of other stuff too. It's also this whole online web editor for working with that game engine. But, excuse me, still sick. Sprig is also a path to introduce other teenagers, or really anybody, to open source. It's a game console. We have a couple of them over here. I'll pass them out a little bit later. And if you want one of the game consoles, you can't buy it. You have to build a game for it. So you have to go into the editor, make your own game, probably learn how to program, and then submit a pull request on GitHub. We'll review that. Right now, all of the pull requests are, basically all of them are reviewed by, I think, a 13-year-old named Lucas. And if your game is, an actual game and you didn't copy somebody else, we'll mail you one of these for free. But not just one of these. You'll get a package, and it has some components. It has a screen and some screws and some acrylic pieces and PCB. And you can assemble those into a Sprig. So that's kind of another way where we're giving people a little bit more ownership over the device they have. And as Leo mentioned, you have the added bonus that it's also kind of a hardware development kit, and you could just take everything apart and take the button off and do whatever you want with that separately. And it's a Raspberry Pi Pico, and that normally runs our firmware, but you could also run whatever firmware you wanted on it. And we encourage people to do that as well. All Sprig games are written in JavaScript with the game engine we built around that. And all of these devices need to run the games people have built. So we wrote a custom operating system for the device with our own JavaScript runtime kind of built around JerryScript that can run all of the games in existence. All of them run perfectly. The thing on this device right now is a game created by a community member, probably around 16, and it's a pretty fun game. Since this is canonical, and this is Ubuntu Summit, and we believe a lot in open source, all of those components are also open source, including the hardware. You could build your own. Anybody could build their own. but we will mail you these for free. Because of that, we've also seen some pretty cool projects. A community member, of course, ported the entire firmware to Python, and also wrote a port of CircuitPython designed for this thing that has library support for the screen and everything involved and all of our custom stuff. And we also have a gallery with over 500, almost 600 now games that people have built, submitted, and almost all of them have gotten devices back from doing so. I'm going to run through a couple of facts. We have more than 500 games. More than 60% of those are people's first times coding and their first pull requests ever. But there's also a lot of people like Leo's friend Lingdong Huang, who's a great practitioner of programmatic art, have done lots of advanced things with the editor as well, building out crazy things. I personally have a game that's kind of still in the kitchen, but is about 6,000 lines long, all in one JavaScript file, and is a procedurally generated roguelike. It's up there with Pico 8 in terms of number of contributions. One of the most active projects on GitHub in terms of fantasy consoles. And it's also listed by MDN and recommended by Itch in their most recent game jam. And it's maintained by teenagers. Like I said, the number one pull request reviewer is this random 13-year-old who just found the project, built games on his own, and started contributing and started reviewing. And eventually we were like, hey, you're pretty good at this. We should let you do more of this. And then now he reviews people's pull requests instantly as soon as they come in. It's incredible. I don't know how he has the time. Our repos have a decent amount of activity as well. Here are the numbers on the main one. I mean, maybe modest by giant canonical project standards, but pretty good. And that's a decent, we get a lot of contributions and it's very actively updated. And a lot of that is by people in the community that aren't us. And I think through all of this, we've kind of seen that if you build something that just inspires people to build things on their own, they end up coming back to it and taking ownership and then having a lot of fun. And that ends up feeding back into a really active, thriving project. So it's been really exciting. Now, since this is pretty cool and we have a couple of these around, I thought we would pass some of these out, and maybe if you guys are interested, you could build some games on your own. It is a workshop. There's an hour left, and I know there aren't a lot of you, but you might find it interesting. If you go to this URL, you'll find the main editor, or scan the QR code. I suppose it's probably better to just go to the URL because you're using computers. I didn't really think that through. If some of you are beginners, it should be pretty easy to get started, and I can walk around in the editor. But you can also do a lot of really interesting things through generating your own maps. Like I mentioned, my game was entirely procedurally generated. Yeah, cool.
Do I actually just pull up the editor?
Yeah, I will in a second. I want to pass these around.
One forever. You have to push out four. Building up four devices.
And now I will attempt to switch to screen mirroring, which is always a very difficult undertaking. How do you do this? Gorgeous. Oh, that's not screen mirroring. I've just managed to switch the two screens. Come on, go ahead. Lovely. So in terms of the editor interface, if you're logged out, which all of you will be, you'll be prompted to start by entering your email address. Completely optional, but if you do so, you'll get an email that will let you like maintain your work instead of it being lost if you close the page. We originally stored everything in local storage, but with schools being our main use case, with those schools clearing their laptops caches regularly, students were losing work. So we had to make a like very complicated, honestly, saving system to work with all of the use cases. The most basic game is just a sprite in a map that can be moved around. This lovely little sprite editor that can be used to, I don't know, draw a hat on the banana and rerun the game. And then various controls can be implemented using mostly getters and setters. So now you can move it up and down. And then there's a help menu in the bottom right, which includes documentation on everything. The map editor also, if you want to put multiple bananas, you can do that or expand the map or anything similar. I believe the canonical resolution is 5x4. So is that 5x4? That is 5x4, and I guess it's not. No, that's 6x4, and that's 6x3. Maybe we need to make this a little bit more intuitive. There we go. Perfect. Now we have a wide playing field for the banana. You can also create audio. Lovely little tune editor. And everything is done with tag template literals. So you would type tune, for example, and then a backtick, and then you can get that. And if you play that, I suppose there's no audio, but it would in theory come through. Wonderful. I'm going to mention some cool things you can do. These tag template literals do just return the string through. So you can, in theory, generate maps entirely on your own with just string manipulation, which enables some interesting things. For example, I could generate a level entirely from starting at a blank string and then like appending some characters. Each sprite is qualified with a single character string, so you can use those to compose characters into maps. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, I'll leave you all maybe some time to experiment and play around.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for being here. We love that. It's obviously a good use group, so I think we can go pretty informal.
Whole floor.
Yeah. I can also set up this drawing machine if we're curious about that. And there is an editor for that as well. Yeah. So,
One thing I was curious about handheld in general.
sure.
Share that now with something. Is that about extension directory?
That we that map, it's at handheld.com/map. Although it may not, it's very difficult to keep these things outdated because essentially each club is run by its own individual person. We try to give those people a lot of agency. So the main way we can update the maps is through sending an email every time with your club still existing and hoping they respond, but some people just never respond. In general, it should be semi-accurate, and then there's in the large you're like sitting there and modifying what you're asked. And if you don't find them, pay for them.
Yeah, and of course, thanks for asking. If you have any questions, as we referenced multiple times, like the main demographic that we serve is teenagers, but of course everything we make is available. And I think the tools are good by any standard.
Yeah.
They're it should be interesting to use. Interested in learning how to program, should be able to benefit from them. The other thing that might be interesting to think about is being probably maybe collection of more advanced like developers yourself who are doing open source is I commented that we have this larger vision, like a kind of new sort of public education that's built around projects, and we're trying to figure out how to expand that to much larger. So far, we basically have 3 projects in that vein, 2 that I mentioned, and 1 enterprise colleague around circuit board design. But we would like to expand it and more, and are very open to hearing people's ideas about like what sort of projects are interesting, and also open to like supporting other projects, this stuff that might fit that model. Yeah, so that's interesting. Would love to hear your thoughts. But otherwise, I guess, yeah, feel free to try the tools and chat. Very much.
You mentioned that you had made different schools.
Yeah.
Is that just of their own volition, or do you have to pass through business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Our general attitude is that you can't force people to learn things to learning themselves. And we also think that school in general is very much top down, probably too much so. So it's been a guiding principle to be really like at will from the student's perspective. So we've really shied away from things like down, working in schools to like bring in stripes. Because we want everyone that's participating to do it. That being said, we are trying to find some like if you're trying to reach young people, they're in school and they often don't know about things unless their teachers or their parents tell them about them. Maybe see them on social media or something. But that's a major source of actually reaching people. So we are trying to figure out ways to better communicate with through adults. But it's not, it's certainly not our ambition to see these things silence homework. It probably runs against anyway, but I think if you learn about it at school, your science teacher, that's good.
I will add there is one way that they are in public classroom setting, which is through the clubs. People will be workshops, right? Some workshops that can be led about Sprig, how to set through, but those are mostly led by a teacher in classes. You probably should better.
I'm wondering about your material. So far, from everything in English, I haven't seen language speech on. So actually, you had some localization of because I'm French, and I'm pretty sure that to reach teenagers, boys, but some will might be a little bit comfortable with English, but most wouldn't because actually English kind of work.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say it's definitely an area for improvement. We have included localization. I don't think Sprig or Blot don't neither support it at the moment.
Never did.
Yeah,
It's partially budgetary, like to localize you. We have a large community. People most active in it and contributing to it are still US, even though people are using it globally. So to localize, you need both the framework around localization, which adds a decent amount of technical complexity, and that means time to actually ship this thing. We finished this in about 6 months. And it needs actual translations.
Yeah,
Which we don't speak French, and there may not be many people who would speak French, but we could definitely do better with like maybe opening that up to more of our products.
from experience, the actual installation of software of resources in different software is often one gateway for issues. That's one of the easiest things. I think it is for us, I guess, to do because we already speak a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And as we mentioned, one of the primary main is working with these. Yes. Yeah. That might be retiring. Hopefully not.
He's basically a single point failure.
He's from Brazil and has made a lot of documentation. And we did have a very active bill in general, not just around Sprig, that helps localize a number of background types. And then so some other folks that translate everything to Spanish.
Actually, all of the Sprig documentation was written in Spanish, or was translated to Spanish by community members. There's also the further difficulty where once it's translated, what happens if you need to update the docs? How do you go across all of the other docs?
But yeah, for sure, given the fact that we're so online forward and want to be accessible to people, like supporting other languages is
It was good where it was okay. I'm feeling so thanks.
yeah. Where it is. Not sure. But, yeah. Yeah, we had a number of very active people in Brazil, but only 5 years left.
Yeah. Literally, you just retired.
Yeah, it's a good question.
We can self-follow.
Generally, the
Checking my database.
people kind of naturally with the agenda. So some people will stay on and work longer. I mean, we have some students that will come back. We're in college, summer.
Sometimes the late jump back to
Yeah, we have a lot of gap year students. People have full time. Typically, I mean, in many ways, like one of the uncommon qualities of Hackland is their way forward from like going to school or just, and in a way, like we kind of hope that they go on, which like Lexi is a great example of, who is leading. And yeah, it's sad to see her go, but I'm excited to see that that the paths are opening up. Yeah, but we also, if somebody's good and they like to work, then we're happy to keep.
How are you? Because you mentioned hiring, so that means actually having resources, let's say resources, financial resources. How do you get your money?
Yeah.
Is as you said, you're shipping hardware basically for free, but you're trading your code.
Yeah.
The primary thing is a lot of philanthropy.
It's entirely fine. And it's mostly
Well, technically, but yes, philanthropy.
well, we don't make money. Yeah. But yeah, it's still free. So we mostly accept unrestricted funds. It's mostly individual, very wealthy donors. Successful tech people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we managed to raise several million every year. So
Yeah, and so like one of our primary founders is the founder of GitHub, Preston Warner, who's also on our board. So he's the supporter. But we're a fairly small organization. So actually we're so committed to open source that we made our own like financial platform where we can publish our finances so you can look in real time how we spend all of our money. And we've made that available to other nonprofits too, at the Crystal Sponsorship Program, partially as a way to offer financial services to young people. But our typical annual operating budget, it's on the order of, is it like $1 to $2 million a year? I think. Yeah. So this is a public site. You can see, exactly what we're doing. And where the money comes from. Curious. And if you are running a nonprofit, it also can act as a yeah. Does anyone want to try to make a game or program?
And how do they update the level of Alan gets first player line?
Yeah, let's see.
First time, like,
Yeah.
okay. After moment, would like to update the level. But then I'm not.
How do you rotate the position? At the state. See, so it's probably go not like we probably get first. Set the X y there.
And I have all over the slide down.
Both of those slides. Yeah, they're
Here.
appropriate. I mean, I think it's kind of schematic. You may just want to render.
Yeah. If you want open phone play, what you could do is generate that map or quickly generate strings like that example. And then I'll set map.
Oh, okay.
Right.
What do you work on?
I make a foundations team. So my work is basically trying not to break Unity. So yeah, it's lots of integration. Lots of reading versions.
I'm trying to get this robot done. Yeah, I'm very impressed with the games that people made.
Well designed.
For being like a majority of them are like first time programmers, and I definitely more than half are actually like fairly basics.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I was hugely surprised by when I was here. I was thinking, okay, that's really early, and actually it was so.
Yeah. No, I mean they're fun. Like I'll sit down to review them, which I think is pretty compelling for
Yeah.
something first program. So over here, I can also, has anyone ever used a grandfather, the CNC machine?
Oh, why did you do it?
So if you're curious to see, I'll set up this one, which is our next unreleased project. So I like this.
Oh, when you say you made your custom OS kind of bits,
Yeah.
is that running on bare metal or are you using?
No. It's bare metal.
Hold on. The base.
There's actually an interesting story there. So our first, Lexi mentioned Cedric. Cedric and I started Sprig, and he was like the other person on my team. We had hired him out of high school. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do, and we saw him at the hack club. And the very first version of the firmware, I got help from two friends of mine who were both very good engineers. So one of them, his name is Brian Silverman. He's one of the people that created Scratch. And the other one was super skilled engineer. He's like a high-level guy at Google. His name is Vadim Versama, and he is best known for a project he did when he was a teenager. It was a game called Tetris that he made living in Soviet Union at the time. He was contracted to do the programming for it. And they did most of the work, and I just kind of glued it together and made functioning firmware. It's a fairly challenging task to write a bare metal like JavaScript for most of it for fun, but getting everything to work and run these games that are supposed to run is a lot of work. And we gave it to Cedric, who was this 19-year-old gap year student, and it worked. We gave it to him, and he threw everything away. All of the code that he got rid of, and he rewrote it himself from scratch, and it was 100.
And then he moved to Mexico.
And then he moved to Mexico.
So now I've been maintaining.
You said it yourself, being an ability. So,
Yeah.
that's why you see so many open source projects. Like, I know if you guys are interested in open Rust, but it's hard. Yeah, it's so funny to see just people taking some utility that some classic utility and just rewriting it to Rust.
And probably not finishing.
Yeah, I know. I have a new interpreter somewhere.
Oh, I'm guilty 5 times. So
Yes, but that's why I ended up at that, because that's why I don't need to actually create projects. I bet on how many people's skills that it's.
exciting. We gotta write some cats. The bunch of something. Some kids.
Yes, but I know this. Yeah. Well. This probably just has some. Person.
So, gee, next up.
Oh, let's see. You mentioned probably. Yes. Can I have the label?
Yeah, the website is cpu.net. That's probably the best way.
I think the people think we not really
Organization.
I guess actually has to.
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple people have translated it, but I think the Russian is. I'm not.
this kind of work is actually the idea of the conversation. It's not supposed to move so much. That's ready to code documentation.
I've been turning around doing translation, but I don't think there's the time in my hands.
Translation is hard work. It's even when you see it, put the topic numbers.
Well, oh, you plugged it. You plugged it in. It's running on device.
Yeah, integration.
Yeah. So that seems like it's loaded.
It's for consulting.
Yeah. It uses web material.
Okay. So
Yeah, there you go.
this one, another web-based editor. You can program into that.
It's just starting.
You find us a great starter language, and so obviously it's just, yeah. Take
Like, so it's First, then we call this. Especially jazz. Really.
really.
Says Babel.
Yeah.
Please give me times. I love times.
It's like, but it seems like a pretty. I think what's funny about it is
I actually.
actually that's just not what you want. It used to be that zero.
Because
It is the end of math character.
even though
Or
I found
it's
it
not actually.
it is the
It is. Yeah, and it's like I read something. But if you want to write a tool that people will actually use, being able to just send somebody to a link instead of having to download something, makes a complete difference. But it also, like, I'm somebody that really likes programming languages, type systems, so it's sort of, I don't know, can be a little frustrating at times. But the thing that is nice about JavaScript is it's like everything included. So if you have, a very good graphics system, and have a good like interaction.
Oh yeah, I mean you mean
The browser itself, yeah. And I mean, and all of the associated technologies, like web APIs, which, I mean, even this, like we use Web Serial, which is only available in Chrome, but it makes it so much easier for somebody to operate a machine like this.
Use it.
are you trying your own game?
No, not really. I just know what it was. Like, where else?
You mentioned that you said they say they're like solderless. They are solderless, yes. So like even the buttons on there's one of it, and that's intentional. We want people to get to other things. The kids come with a space board that is soldered, and then together they screw it together and such. So we're not like forcing it yet. Yeah.
So part of the idea here is also to be digital verification for home access. So it's kind of designed to be just like machine technology with it. But of course, the hardware is open source, the firmware is open source. And instead of having
People just like
like
yeah.
so typically you build a sort of machine.
I mean, in theory, you do this. No.
Which allows
They were doing it all
I think that to me is actually the first subject because it is physically still so it's actually quite big done. I mean, it's actually used to get to convince the parents to it, to keep playing with it. It's majors, of course, they usually have that. But with that, you can actually give that to dog and manipulation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also find I really like this project. I mean, I like, but this is kind of like one of my favorite topics. Because for me,
Wait, is that a Sprig email? Oh, that's one of the best games.
Agreed.
Although I don't like it's
funny people watch papers.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Which is actually cool.
There's a glitch somewhere, but
Yeah, and it's kind of yeah, it's like interesting.
I don't know how it's that device, but it's nice. Oh, wow, that's
is there another workshop?
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't feel.
I don't know, I don't. I do really see it. You're the first sort of
this is the game
ish
I
I went to.
Oh, really?
I read it so far, it's neighbors and people.
and I'm certainly
Well,
game that only runs on web, but it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, you should give me an idea.
yeah.
That has nothing to do. Yeah, you give me an idea.
what's it?
When you mention that, yeah, something that annoys me is that, like, so I play music, I play instruments, but the thing is, I don't have the skills to arrange
Mhm.
and I got to just have a do that, so that people take that, you know, just run with it. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I might actually. This is not
My
I don't think it's lacking. It's really complex. It's a lot of choices.
I mean, if it's already existing,
it's different than what they're describing, but this is like like a community production studio. That has more sound and basically what they did with
Maybe it should run after
building.
Although eventually that game was
They actually have,
given exactly.
I tried to flash it before.
but I understand how to actually use this description of it. Like, people will post it.
yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, you should check it out.
You need the firmware.
Well, that's a physical design of the.
That's actually pretty natural.
I know why I've told you that one. It's actually something to have the proper word to search for.
Mhm.
Is like.
Do you, did the LLMs help?
I guess they would.
Yeah.
Probably. I just didn't use it. Last time I tried, they were offline because too many people waiting on the API. Like, I just feel since they come to my job yet.
So you said you're French.
Yes.
Your accent sounds a little different.
It's because I lived in Germany and I basically learned to speak English in Germany.
I see. Yeah.
And also for some weird reason. I think I British English conversation other than American.
Probably a lot of Americans do that too. Sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
It's easier because most of the
Yeah.
And also, I remember when I'm in France, most native people that I meet are Chinese.
Yeah, definitely you should check this out. See if we can- yeah. Like, so which water bottles were yours?
I drink all of my water.
So this one, and this one's mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, every time you run into one of them, you have to just recognize it. That would help. So I just always look at it. So you want to have run into that. Okay.
Breathing the engine.
It's the false hot brigade.
Yeah. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. Yeah, sorry, the talk is going a bit different than what you expected, but hopefully still interesting.
I could actually help with someone.
No.
You mentioned that I might.
Yeah, we can talk about that too. I mean, it's obviously something.
This is the hardest one.
Be honest. I think it's what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, sit down and yeah, I get it.
It's
I think my brother.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just a good project.
it's
That's personal.
then you have to like
The resources.
And right
Yeah.
now, it's not
And
really
hard.
not right where they advise.
I think it helps to go one thought out.
Because I'm not sure. But back at that.
I keep thinking like, oh, I'll select you.
Right.
Games, but
Yeah.
So. Website. But it's not.
That's a little bit harder.
It's all like.
Yeah. I mean, probably, but it is also. I've been working on optimizing it. In this case, it consists of rewriting everything to use categories very compactly. Essentially, low level JavaScript. So it's slowly natural. I just reached double to myself, which is pretty good. And it's so straight. Yeah, I would say so.
My web expertise.
It turns out you can.
Last time I traded with
Yeah,
like a year ago. But yeah, that's also like
And you can have a lot of juice out. And you got like the PI goes. Do you have to switch up? We're not gonna get
use
search fun. Yeah, that's like the coolest story. But I don't like. I feel bad to them. You can get those things that you put out. Yeah, it was so
ways.
the big problem.
Ways.
Are you using? Yeah,
That's
no. Well,
the great thing about it.
that's that.
Real
Because the thing is,
that's actually
we need.
as soon as something breaks, you can just read it. But you can always build what broke. That's if you want to read the should
Not much. Yeah, and that's basically. Like not anyway, so because of this, we're really hard to vote. But you also don't want to vote. But 10 minutes for the thing to like the first one. Because the in between.
The old back down.
And coming from